All right, good morning. We're officially recording. It is so great to see everyone's faces. It feels like it's been longer than July, but I'm thrilled to see everybody. If we could this morning, we'll begin with the Pledge of the Allegiance, and we'll just all join this together. If you join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you take roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Director Branscombe. Absent Chapman.
Here.
Gog.
Yes.
Early for Guerrero. Absent Jennings.
I am here, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Joyner.
Here.
Lauren.
Here.
Sander.
Here.
Vice Chair Soon.
Here.
Chair Gallardo.
Here.
Thank you. And I'm looking for a Caltrans representative. I don't see Director Bullhorn, excuse me, Director Benny Paul. We'll mark him absent.
Thank you so much. Well, this is an opportunity now for public communications and an opportunity for any member of the public to discuss or address any item that is not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment at this time?
We have no public comment.
All right.
Director Branscombe is present.
Thank you. I'll note that for the record.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. My apologies. Yes, I still have a house phone and yeah, it's ringing. So my apologies for the noise in the background. Excuse me. Sorry about that. That's the beauty of technology. Well, before we start our agenda, I'd like to take just a minute. I'm so happy to see everybody back. I know July went quick, but thrilled to have everyone here. And I'm thinking since it's August already, and we already saw, I think, our Stockton schools started and the schools are getting ready. I'm going to ask you all to take 30 seconds and tell me who was your favorite teacher and why. I know. So because you guys, because I'm looking at staff first, I'm going to start with you guys. Madam Clerk, you're closest.
Oh, wow.
Your favorite teacher and why?
Yeah, my favorite teacher was from Del Campo High School, local school. Mr. Cody, he was an English and drama teacher. I didn't have him for drama because I was too shy to do drama, but he was an English teacher and he really helped with my love of reading and love of books. And he has stayed in my memory all these years and just an all around great teacher, really motivating. He passed away recently and there were so many accolades of folks who had written on his memory page online from just former students. So he really made a difference in my life and others.
That's fabulous. Well, hey, I'm seeing who else is in the stack. Oh, you know you're up. Let's say I got the stack table. Let's go.
Sure. My memory isn't as great as Lynette's, but I do remember really, really loving my 7th grade biology teacher. We did a lot of really fun experiments and it sort of opened my eyes to science and stuff I still try to recreate with my kids and share stories with them of dissecting things and all of that. But yeah, it was a lasting impression, and I wish for the life of me I could remember her name, but she was awesome.
Boy, this is a tough one, Chair Gallardo. So probably I'm going to go to college, but I had a college professor who we did a sort of an environmental planning class, and I had a paper about a big development happening in New England. And he said, you can't just write a paper about this. You have to call the people, and I want you to call all the city council members to get there. This is my beginning in public policy. I can't call city council people. Like, what would they? Why would they pick up the phone and talk to me? And lo and behold, actually, they would love to talk to me. And it was my beginning of understanding that all of these, local decisions and the council members are just so engaged in their communities and have things to say and wanted to talk to a college student. It was like mind blowing to me, but it was what he really did was gave me the confidence, right? Like he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself.
You started our student youth program before you even knew it. Director Jennings, I see you up top.
Oh, that brings fond memories. My third grade Spanish teacher was someone who I fell in love with the language and her ability to help me to be able to speak that language. And unfortunately, my parents moved to another area, and instead of learning Spanish, I had to learn French. So and the teacher was horrible. So I went from good to bad, but I did learn a little bit of French. So that's the good thing that came out of it.
And you've used it since ever?
Parlez-vous français? Je m'appelle Richard, et tu?
I love it. Dr. Gog, how about you? Oh, hey, we got you muted. We got to unmute you. Oh, Director Gog, you're still muted. There you go.
I don't really think anybody want to know my story. I had a really rough childhood. We had this school that only had one room, but you had classes outside. You sat on the ground and you attended your classes. All the classes were outside in the open. And all the teachers there, they believed in a punishment. If you didn't do your homework or you didn't behave right or you said something wrong, smack. One of my teachers carried a little bamboo stick about 2 foot long, and he grabbed you by your hand and he beat on you till you're dancing on your toes. The other teacher, he had a long stick and he whipped you like a horse. He just kind of right at your ankle and your top part of your leg, and he just kind of bruised the heck out of you. And then the other teacher, what he did was you had to bend over and reach your ear from between your legs and hold them like this and keep your butt up higher for 10, 15 minutes at a time. That was his example of how to keep a student in line. So the capital punishment was big there, and I didn't like going to school because of that. So I skipped school as much as possible.
For good reason. Can you imagine? Can you even imagine? Oh,
well, getting punishment like that during the winter time when there's no heater, no nothing, and your hands are frozen, and they whip you, you don't really feel nothing other than the pain in the particular part of the body where they hit you at. It's like glows like red. But I had a great childhood though. Other than that, I enjoyed the heck out of my life.
Other than that torture, it was great. Okay. Gosh.
So I didn't really have any favorite teacher at all till I came to high school. So give me another minute. So
Yeah.
I came to high school, couldn't read, write, or do anything, and they started me in 9th grade, and I had a barely 4th grade education from India. And I had this beautiful, nice teacher named Mrs. Bryant, and she taught me how to read. They had those projectors where they put one word at a time on the screen. So she started me with what if this cat, and then she would raise it faster and faster, and I could start reading sentences. And so in high school, I learned to read and write, and I was good at math all the time, and I didn't have no trouble passing my math classes. And I had to really accelerate in freshman year, so I passed high school in four year and went to college to get a degree in electronics.
Wow. Wow. That's a success story. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's fabulous. Director Branscombe, that's going to be a hard one to follow, Director Branscombe.
Yeah, thanks for calling me next.
Yeah.
I had some really wonderful experiences. A professor in college who gave me an A when I didn't think I deserved it. And I asked him why, and he said, well, success breeds success. So put the success in your pocket and move forward. He was right. And I also remember, and this is when I was in the Navy, I went in the Navy out of high school, and I went to air traffic control school. And there's a chief petty officer there who took me under his wing and encouraged me. And I ended up setting academic records. And both of those messages are messages of encouragement. They're just great.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Lauren, how's that? Nice. Yep, there you are.
Hi. Well, I will say that I had mainly great teachers. I was also a teacher for 20 years, and I'm hoping that kids tell stories about how wonderful Miss Lauren was. But my favorite teacher was Miss Sabato in 4th grade. She was a Filipina woman and told stories about the Philippines often, and also really encouraged enrichment. And I think I started 4th grade as a normal 4th grader, and I had a college reading average by the time I finished her year. So she was a great teacher and a great inspiration, and made me really want to travel. So great experience.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Director Joyner, I'm running across the top here.
Oh boy. All right. So I'm going to go with a guy by the name of Ray Reinhardt. I was, my undergrad degrees in business, but I took a summer and went to acting school at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. And the original instructor, for some reason, dropped out. She taught from a book by Uta Hagen called Respect for Acting. And she was absolutely by the book. She left. Ray Reinhardt came in, classically trained Shakespearean actor. And I don't even remember what the questions were. I asked him a question and he began responding for about 10 minutes, pure rote, straight out of the book. And he paused all of a sudden and he looked at me and said, you know what? That's all bullshit. Forget all that I just said. And from then on, it was just plain speak from his own experience and his own knowledge. And it's really stuck with me that he had the ability to catch himself, to correct, and earn the respect of everybody in the class at that moment in time, because it was no longer the book teaching us. It was somebody with his wisdom and experience teaching us.
What you're impressive is the fact that if he'd just done it out of the book, you would have never remembered it again. But
Right.
Yeah, you found the way to do it. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Director Soon.
Thank you, Chair Galdo. It's a great question. I love hearing these stories. I had a few to pick from, but I'm going to follow James's example and go with college. My materials engineering professor, Dr. Heidersbach, and he would start the class every day. This is materials engineering, asking us random questions. Who won the game? Who was the largest president in the history of the United States? Those are a couple ones that I remembered. And his whole point was to start to learn to talk to people about everyday things and not just engineering. So I found that, very, very forward thinking on his part to train his students to prepare for careers, where you go to college and you think, you're just going to be doing this technical stuff, but he always reminded us about, being able to speak to about everyday things with people is important as well. So thanks. You're on mute, Chair Galdo. I think you're still on mute.
You're on mute, Chair Galdo.
It was tiny. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's see. Who am I missing? Right.
I don't think Director Sander has gone yet, Chair Gallo.
Sandra, I see you up there.
All right, I had a little more time to think about this, but it actually wasn't a hard decision. I guess the cop-out answer would be my mom, who was a teacher and had me reading before I started kindergarten. So that was sort of, she's a great teacher still. The actual answer I'm going to be following my colleagues here as a professor. I was a physics major as an undergrad, physics and biology, but physics was sort of where my heart was at the time. And I had a physics professor by the name of John Gamble. And he had a very interesting history that's particularly relevant right now because he's probably not named, but he might appear in the Oppenheimer movie as a character because he was a physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project. His mentor was Hans Bethe. Bethe was he's like my scientific grandfather, if you view it that way. There's a Nobel Prize winning theoretical physicist who was like the #2 guy at the Manhattan Project. And then 20 years later, his student, my professor, John Gamble, was the theoretical director at Los Alamos. He then came and was department chair where I was a physics student. And he took me under his wing and showed me how to do research, taught me a lot about life. I think I did projects with him for probably 3 years solid. He just sort of pulled me out of the crowd of physics students. I had no idea why. And in the end, he blessed me moving on to graduate school, mainly working in biology, not physics. So absolutely awesome guy, great stories, really shaped my my view of life and my attitude and approach as a scientist.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And I have to tell you, I loved every bit of that movie and the connections with Caltech. I think I took my son to the Exploratorium his whole entire life. I had no idea that Frank Oppenheimer had founded the Exploratorium. And that was yeah, that's an awesome story. Thank you. Nancy, Director Young, I've got Nancy still here.
Hi, yes, I was like, I wonder if you're gonna call on me. But and I'm trying to think, because just last week I was honoring my first grade teacher, Mrs. Benning, and how she was very impactful in my life. But then the more I thought about it, I mean, I have a lot of teachers. I know almost every single teacher I've ever had. And so I'm going to skip to 10th grade. In 10th grade, I was in my yearbook class, and the advisor from the government class, he was subbing that day in the class. As soon as I sat down in the class, he was like, I need to see Nancy Lipscomb, which is my maiden name. And I know I'm like, I didn't get in trouble. Like, I'm a good student. So I walked up, I'm like, well, I'm she, so how can I help you? And he was like, I need you to run for student body president. I was like, oh, no. First of all, I don't even know who you are. And that's not me. I was 10th grade secretary. And I'm like, I'm good. And he's like, no, I've heard a lot about you. I don't know where from, probably teachers. But anyways, he said, I need you to run for president. I thought that I was too young. And so I thought I needed to be a junior. He said, no, you can't, you can do it. And so I said, well, I have a friend running for president. I'll run for vice president. I'll think about that. So then I put in my name for vice president. It's like everybody in the school was running for vice president. So it was the largest category. And so I kept my little stick pins and my little paper name badges. And, I hand people a little stick pin and stick it on them. Did you wear my pin? And other candidates were giving out donuts and balloons. I worked at McDonald's. They wasn't taking up all of my paycheck for all that. I said, no, you have a little piece of paper and a stick pin. And so, but we did have debates. And the day of elections, I had to go off site for a meeting, and I missed voting for myself. I got home, asked my sister, she forgot. Asked my best friend, she forgot to vote for me. I'm like, the 3 guaranteed votes I didn't even get. And so this don't make any sense. And so the next day they announced the winner. And someone had said that I won. I said, no, don't lie to me. And then I saw Mr. Cockrell. He walked up to me, well, congratulations, Ms. Vice President. I'm like, I won. And so that kind of started it all. That kind of started off for me to push beyond what I thought that I could do, what I saw in myself. And then the next year I ran unopposed for student body president when I became a senior. So that started this journey.
Your sister knew you had it. She wasn't worried about voting for you. You were covered.
Yeah, she forgot.
Oh, thank you so much. I will tell you, I'm sitting here thinking I have like Director Grog, you gave me a little, probably a horror throwback, because I still remember in junior high at Winston Churchill, they had my math teacher, the kid that sat in front of me, and I know his name exactly because I think I'm still terrified. He always got in trouble, and it was very calm, but my math teacher would then walk down the aisle, and the kid sat right in front of me, and he would smack him on the back. And I'm sure that might have done something for him, but it made me crazy. I was so wound nuts over that. So I'd forgotten all about it until you said that, like, oh, geez. But I had my favorite teacher last year in high school, not too far from Del Campo from that, but was Mr. Rennie. And I will tell you, I didn't like him a bit when I was there. He was the hardest teacher I had, and I appreciate him absolutely the most now, my US history teacher, because he was fabulous. And of course, my very, very most favorite teacher was my daughter's high school teacher. I married him, so that seems like the right thing to do.
Chair Gallardo, I don't think we've also heard from Director Chapman yet.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
We can't be letting people sneak out of this.
Thank you. I almost thought I got out of it. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Yeah, my favorite teacher was my 7th grade history teacher. Much like Director Joyner was saying, it was a very charismatic and engaging teacher. He was fresh out of college. In the way that he brought history to life fueled my love for it to this day. I'm a huge history buff all across the board. So it's something that sticks with me. And I remember clearly and vividly the conversations in that class and the way that he led our groups through those conversations and had us learn more about really pivotal points in our history. So like I said, it's fueled my current love for history now that I try and pass on to my own kids. So thank you.
I love that. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. I know I've got a couple staff folks out there, and there's certainly, I think, Kyler, I think, is out there. Clint, Sue, if you guys want to participate, please just speak up. All right, they're saved. Well, thank you guys. It's such a great way to learn a little bit about us. I love it, and we'll all be excited for school to start. And in our transportation hats, I know we'll be all very cautious to watch all those little darlings running around. I think everybody will be started in the next 2 weeks here. We are going to move on to our consent calendar. We can act on these on one item. And anybody have any questions on the consent calendar?
Chair Gallardo, sorry for the interruption. It does look like we have a member of the public with their hand raised, and this might be someone who's wanting to speak on the public communications. I know you already took that up, but would you like them to go ahead and speak?
Absolutely, thank you. Please go ahead.
Oh, apologies, they put their hand down. So I'm presuming they don't want to speak anymore. So sorry, we can go ahead.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. With that, if there's no questions on the consent calendar and no public comment on the consent calendar, I will ask for a motion.
Join
Consent.
approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you take roll?
Yes, and then just to clarify for the record, there's no public comment for consent. Director Branscombe?
Yes.
Chapman?
Aye.
Gog?
Yes.
Early for Guerrero? Absent Jennings?
Yes.
Joyner?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
Sander?
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon?
Aye.
And Chair Gallardo?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. This is a moment where we are going to close our regular meeting and reconvene as our CDR Safe Committee. And in doing so, we again need to take roll call. So Madam Clerk, could you take roll for the CDR Safe Committee?
Yes, thank you. Director Branscombe?
Yes.
Chapman?
Here.
Gog?
Yes.
Early for Guerrero is absent. Jennings?
Here.
Joyner? We'll note for the record that Director Joyner is here. Director Lauren?
Here.
Sander?
Yes.
Sure.
Young?
I'm present.
Vice Chair Soon,
Here,
and Chair Galdo.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, our first item is public communications, and this is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on any item that is not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments?
There's no public communications.
Thank you. Well, then we will move on to our consent calendar. There are 2 items. If anyone has any questions on the consent calendar. And if not, then I will look for a motion.
Sorry, Chair Galdo, we do just need to take a motion to hold this meeting remotely, the CVR Safe Committee. Would it be okay if we take that up
First,
now?
you want them separately?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So
Please.
moved.
oh, second,
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any public comment?
No public comment.
See none, roll call vote, please.
Director Ransom,
Yes.
Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero is absent, Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
I,
Vice Chair Soon,
aye.
and Chair Galdo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And Young, yes. So-
And yes, thank you.
Our second item is the approval of the minutes, and can I have a motion for that item?
Chair Galdo, if you'd like, we could take the consent items all at in one vote, if that meets with your approval.
Got it. And I think please, thank you. Yep, we can get a motion for that consent item or for the consent
Yeah.
calendar.
Young will move the motion.
Thank you.
Jennings will second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Chapman,
Aye.
Gog,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero is absent, Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes, aye.
Sander,
I,
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Galdo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I will add Young to that.
And Young,
Yes.
apologies.
The bad part of the end of the alphabet. You got to flip to that next line, Lauren. Thank you. We'll move on for our first and only action item is the Castle Rock Maintenance and Operations Services Extension. And Lauren Battalius is going to be our presenter.
We can't hear her. Chair Galdo, sorry, Lauren, I think you're muted. We can't hear you, but Chair Galdo, that was part of the consent calendar.
Thank you. You know, I'm looking at my agenda and it has it down as an action item.
Oh, I'm sorry, apologies. You're right, that's my mistake. Lauren, if you want to go ahead and try again, we'll see if we can hear you.
Lauren, it doesn't show you're muted, but we're not hearing you.
I'm not sure why. Can you hear me
There you
now?
go. Now we
Okay.
get you.
Great. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Lauren Battalius, and thank you all for your service, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Lauren, it is very quiet. We're hearing you, but it's very quiet.
It's very strange. Can you hear me now?
I don't know if else. I'm hearing you, but again, very quiet. It does seem like when you're closer, like we're going to zoom in on your face. It seems like it's a little bit better.
Okay. I'm not sure because my speakers seem to be working. I didn't have this issue in my last meeting. Can you hear me now?
I'm hearing you. It is just very quiet. Is everybody else able to hear her? Thumbs up.
Barely.
Okay.
I can barely.
Okay, let me get my headphones. Just 1 second. Is there another item that we can address, or 1 minute? I will
Okay.
be right back.
No problem. We can have a commercial interruption.
That's right. Make Eric Johnson tell us who his favorite teacher was.
There you go. I like it.
Okay, my favorite teacher was a twofer. I had Mrs. Albright for 4th and 5th grades for our GAINT program in Merced. So wonderful experience down there.
So good. You sat with her twice, huh?
Sour the Trice still sends my mom a Christmas card every year.
There you go.
Hopefully it was twice by choice.
I did not repeat, yeah, 4th and 5th grades.
He wasn't held back.
Um,
All right, Lauren's back.
Sarah, do you mind if I try again? How is this?
Not any better.
I'm not sure then, because this is a different.
In fact, I think it might have got a little worse, to be honest with you, for me.
Yeah, me too.
How about now?
That's better. That's better.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we just needed a reboot. Thank you so much. Are we okay?
We're going to make it. We're listening intently.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for your service. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. This will be a brief item. The issue before you today is a standard one-year renewal of SACOG's current contract for maintenance and operations, aka MNO services with Castle Rock for the SACOG region's 511 Traveler Information System, the Condition Acquisition Reporting System, StarNet User Interface, CARS, and the associated third-party data feed interfaces for the period covering October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. And I'll briefly get into what that means in just a moment. SACOG staff requests that the Transportation Committee recommend that the board approve a one-year renewal of SACOG's contract for MNO services with Castle Rock to continue operation of the StarNet system. So a bit of background, the StarNet system, or the Sacramento Transportation Area Network, is a major component of the Sacramento region's intelligent transportation systems. You may have heard ITS, the term ITS architecture. The architecture inventories all of the current and planned ITS components in the region, how they are connected, and what information will be shared between them, and provides common terminology for all local traffic and transit operations systems included, and functions as the blueprint for building a regional ITS system. The modules operated by Castle Rock provide a working architecture for local partners to make critical transportation planning and operations decisions, including many of your jurisdictions. So this contract was last taken to the board for an extension in 2022 for the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year. This request would just be for one additional year. For those of you who are new to this, ITS in this context is essentially what we call the back end of the full feature 511 Traveler Information website. It includes things like the transit components of the overall 511 Traveler Information System, things like crash reports, lane closures, and a service that makes data available to third parties and an accessible app for third parties. You can find the full list of features in the attached report. Our primary users are partner agencies and jurisdiction staff and planners. SACOG plans to review the current system and make recommendations for better features and its improvement this fiscal year. Therefore, approval of this one-year extension will provide SACOG and local partners with continued operations of this critical infrastructure. So in addition, the budget has been reduced from 2022 to 2023, which is great news. The draft scope of work and budget for 2023 to 2024 is actually attached if you want to take a look at it. The fiscal impact to SAFE funding is $434,759. Castle Rock did not apply the cost of living adjustment to the budget this year, so the costs are exactly the same as 2022 to 2023, and the annual work plan and optional development tasks were removed from the budget because we're evaluating the system. So the budget is slightly less than the last fiscal year. So at this time, SACOG staff requests that the Transportation Committee recommend that the board approve a one-year renewal of SACOG's contract for MNO services to continue critical operation of this system.
Thank you. Is there any questions on this item? Not seeing any hands up. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Thank you. Seeing none, then I will look for a motion.
Soon move the item.
Lauren will second the item.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Director Branscombe?
Yes.
Chapman,
Aye.
Goff,
Yes.
Early for Guerrero is absent. Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Lauren,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon,
Aye.
and Chair Gallardo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Do you want to add in Director Young?
And Young, Director Young.
If I said like write it on the bottom of the paper or something.
That's
Very important to me. Yeah.
Let's start backwards.
Let's start with City of Tracy first. Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm just inserting myself in somewhere here. Yeah.
I'm still on.
Write-in ballot.
Well, thank you all. At this time, we'll adjourn as the Capital Valley Regional Service Authority for Freeways and Expressways Committee, and we'll reconvene as the Transportation Committee. Welcome back. And our first information item
Hi,
is
everyone.
the Federal Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. And Clint, Holtzen, you are our presenter.
Good morning. Is my audio coming through clear for everyone?
Yes.
Awesome. So I wanted to give a brief update on the efforts to update our federal MTP. So you may recall we're working through a legislative extension of our 2020 MTP SCS, specifically more on the state side. So what we're looking for is to get we've got a bill going through the legislature right now to get us an extension on updating a major update of our plan out until the fall of 2025. While that works for the state side, there's also a federal side of our plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan component, that we need in compliance with the Federal Clean Air Act so that projects can continue to get programmed and move forward through various phases. So what we are doing is a minor update of kind of the federal component of the plan. So shifting some projects around in time, primarily focused on the projects that are sitting in the Transportation Improvement Program. So that's the near-term program. We're fairly limited on the changes that we're entertaining for this update because we need it to stay consistent with the state plan that is going to continue. But there are some changes that have happened in the years since we adopted that last plan in 2020. Projects continue to advance. We want to make sure that we've got the latest information sitting in the plan so that your local projects, your road maintenance projects, your rehab projects, your construction projects can still move through. So we also, in addition to kind of making sure we've got all the latest project information, scope, schedule, budget, all updated in the improvement program, we also need to update our revenue assumptions for that plan, just in light of the 2 sales taxes in Placer County and Sacramento County. There's still efforts to move those forward, and so we're intending on keeping those as part of the plan, but we need to relook at those and provide some justification to why those are still very reasonably available in our long-range plan. And we're working through those questions with FHWA and with Caltrans and EPA. So we did do a call for project updates to your local staff in April. We got about 22 changes, so still a fairly modest update. We're reviewing those now, running through our air quality tests and all of that to make sure that we're still going to be able to be in compliance. Our plan is to be able to release for public review and comment kind of that updated set of projects and some justification around the financial assumptions, all of that. We want to release that in towards the end of August for public review. We'll likely come back to this committee in September with the draft changes, all of the errata to the existing plan, those justifications for the sales tax measures, respond to any comments that we receive, and then the hope is that we would be able to adopt at your November 8th or 9th board meeting. With that adoption, we'll pass this along to Caltrans, FHWA for their review so that we can get that federal plan in compliance for that 18-month interim period between what would have been our normal adoption schedule, but with the extension is now at the end of 2025. And then when we adopt the blueprint in 2025, that'll reset the clock. It'll replace all of the projects, and then we'll be back onto a 4-year cycle, and these things will be aligned again. So we'll be coming to you with a draft next month. reviewing comments, going through our 45-day roughly public review period, and then coming back to you for an action in November. So just a really quick update, because we haven't talked about this much since we pursued the extension, but wanted to make sure you knew that this was still in the works. We are working with your local staff. We've got the changes, we're reviewing them now, and can report back more in the next month or so. So that's my very brief update on this, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments you have.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Clint on this item? I'm not, you must have covered it. I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to the next item on this fall.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to item number 7, which is our Engage, Empower, and Implement update, and Nicole Porter will be our presenter.
Dr. Gallardo actually will be presenting with Nicole, and I will be sharing my screen in just a moment.
Wonderful, thank you. We have Rosie and Ramos will be assisting in this presentation.
Yes, great. I believe you are all able to see my screen. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started, and then I'll turn it over to Nicole. But good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today and bring you an update on the Engage, Empower, Implement framework and what we've been up to this summer since we last met in June. Today, you'll be hearing a little bit about all the things that we did this summer, some really critical information that we've been gathering from our community-based organizations and our jurisdiction partners, our cities and counties. And the conversations that we've had with them that will be influencing and informing our framework that is in the process of being developed. As a reminder, EEI is focused on investing in the region's most disinvested communities with the intent of creating a pipeline of community-based projects rooted in equity and justice principles. So what we have envisioned for EEI is collaboration between cities and counties and the community-based organizations working together to lead to co-created projects and ideas. We also want to create examples of best practices of community-based and collaborative planning so that we can achieve our goals together, and community inclusion in the planning and decision-making process from the beginning. And so these 3 outcomes, we've been workshopping and speaking to CBOs and jurisdictions about them, and really trying to understand what these 3 topics mean to everybody. I want to talk a little bit about what we have done and the process that we've been embarking on since January. In January is when we brought on our consultants, HRNA and our sub AIM Consulting. They came on and we've been working together to establish our goals, our processes, our engagement plan. And so through the summer and through April and July, really, we've been working with them to coordinate focus groups and do surveys and different one-on-ones and different conversations with a lot of different folks that we basically have reached out to about 100 different CBOs. We've engaged with about 30, but I would like to say that about 100 people have been aware of EEI, have been invited to participate, and about 30 CBOs have participated, and Nicole will get into the details of what we've learned on that. But we've been really sharing out with different folks about what we're doing. We've also coordinated closely with our partners at EDCTC and PCTPA, bringing them into the conversation, sharing out the information that we have. We've hosted roundtable conversations, like I mentioned, in surveys for CBOs, but also for jurisdictions that have given us a lot of really great information to help us inform the framework. One of our consultants our consultant is currently now working on that framework using all the information that they've gathered. And we do plan to bring a framework to you this fall in September and October. With that process, I want to give it over to Nicole to really dive into what we've talked about with the community-based organizations and some of the key learnings that we've had there.
Thanks, Rosie. So as Rosie mentioned, we've spent about 3 months engaging with 37 community-based organizations throughout SACOG 6-county region. As a quick refresher, our focus group topics included what are the most pressing needs in our communities, what level of public support should an EEI project have, and how do we measure that public support? Who has experience applying to SACOG funding opportunities in the past, and who hasn't, and why not? how will our EEI applicants be scored and who scores them? And finally, how can we evaluate the overall impacts of programs and projects that are a result of the EEI funding program? So what have we learned so far? Some of the key themes that we've heard. First, we're going to focus on the topic of applying for and receiving grant funds. We've heard that many grant applications are often tedious and complicated, and our CBOs don't always get notified about a funding opportunity in time until it's too late for them to apply. Contract requirements can be a huge barrier. Even small contracts require really extensive forms and documents that are preventing CBOs from applying to grants. CBOs also lack the staff and volunteer capacity to develop strong grant applications. Around receiving grant funds, typically the reimbursement process can take a long time, and 60 days might not seem like a lot of time for a public agency or a private consulting firm, but it is a lot of time for smaller community-based organizations. A few have brought up the idea of potentially finding funding sources that make it possible to fund some projects upfront and account for potential cash flow issues down the line. CBOs also highlighted that, they have a need for a pre-application period. They think that they have quality solutions that can really help address their community's needs, but they just don't have enough time to gather enough community partners and develop a strong, comprehensive proposal to submit. Next, I'm going to share some of the key feedback that we've heard about creating partnerships. So there is a need to reestablish trust. We did hear from CBOs, and I think it's positive and really promising that they're at a place where they're really willing to develop relationships with one another in public agencies over time. There's a need for better two-way communication. So, SACOG and other public agencies in our region could be doing more to share information about previous funding awards, community events, and funding opportunities, just to help really create a strong communication network between us. CBOs also really want an opportunity to give feedback and be included in the conversation, especially our CBOs that are in more isolated communities. And they may have disillusioned community members. So feeling heard and being given the opportunity to be in those conversations can go a long way. We definitely heard that we should be engaging with trusted community leaders. CBOs have trust in some of their faith-based communities, local justice organizations, and individual advocates that have a long history of serving their community. And both SACOG and public agencies could benefit from engaging with these key folks to help create long-term grounded relationships. And finally, we heard a lot about transparency. CBOs want cross-industry accountability and transparency for funding opportunities and projects right from the start when they begin. So ultimately, all of this feedback that we received from our CBO engagement, in addition to our recent discussions with jurisdictions, will help us and our consultant develop the EEI funding framework. And this framework will include information on our funding program guidelines, the application process, how we plan on allocating the funds, and program evaluation. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rosie to talk through the feedback that we've heard from our jurisdiction so far. Oh, you're on mute, Rosie.
Okay, sorry, there was a lot of tabs happening. Okay, so thank you, Nicole, for that. And I really want to reiterate a lot of the things that we heard from the CBOs are also things that we heard from the jurisdictions, but really want to walk through some of the more detailed information that we've gathered that will also be used in the framework development. So we essentially categorize the information that we heard into the 4 buckets of some of the concerns and also what are the things that folks are looking forward to with working with CBOs. We discussed the application process, the overall engagement process, and of course, metrics. And when it comes to working with CBOs, there's a lot of the same themes of rebuilding trust with community-based organizations, really wanting to make sure that staff and the jurisdictions feel comfortable. And actually, when we asked folks through our survey, Most people were indicating that they felt somewhat or very comfortable working in partnership with community-based organizations, which is great to hear. So that echoes that willingness to partner and collaborate. We really also discussed the need to emphasize the roles and responsibilities that each group would take in some kind of partnership for EEI. So making sure that they're able to meet in the middle and really be transparent about what each, whether it's a jurisdiction, the city, the county, or the CBO, what everyone is doing on their end to meet to the goals that we establish. A lot of the conversations also led to capacity on both ends as well. Capacity for the jurisdictions to have the time, the staffing, the cultural competency sometimes, and then also the capacity on the CBO side. Some CBOs are very small. They also brought this up themselves. They don't have the capacity to do, a very long process when it comes to managing a fund, a grant or something like that. And so really understanding what capacity looks like on both sides and supporting each other to get to a place where we can work effectively together. A lot of the concerns also that we heard from jurisdictions was sometimes community-based organizations feel the need to have support from the entire community, and sometimes that's not possible. So how do we make sure we establish, what's going to be that limit or the amount of information that will help us feel good moving forward with some idea or a project. The application process was also something that was brought up, that folks across the board, whether it's CBOs or the jurisdictions, we want clean and clear, concise applications, as simple as possible, and access to technical assistance, and of course, flexibility on a lot of different components to that. I just came back from the California Adaptation Forum, and there was a lot of conversations about needing to do pre-application and preparation work to even get to the beginning of a project. And so that really echoed a lot of the information that we gathered from the jurisdictions, actually, that folks want to be able to work with SACOG staff, the CBOs, even before we actually get to the official part of the project phase, if you will, or the engagement phase for a project. So pre-application, pre-project development is really critical in the application process itself. Of course, the engagement itself, really critical to make sure that we give enough time for engagement that's meaningful. Jurisdictions shared their concerns with not wanting to push something that was just sort of that looks good on paper, but that doesn't actually get to something meaningful. And so we really hear that. And I think CBOs also share that concern. And so really wanting to make sure that we create enough space and time for folks to do the engagement work that's needed. And this work is ultimately slow. It is slow work. And so we're hearing that from jurisdictions as well. And that also leads to capacity again, because the capacity of staff to do something for a long time is also something we really need to consider. And then overall, when we talk about metrics, this one's a tricky one. Measuring something like EEI or the projects that come out of it, what does real equity look like? That's a really complicated and hard question, but folks really are interested in seeing, the numbers of engagement go up, people coming to the table. This might mean we're setting a baseline as well. We might not have tons to compare it to beforehand, but maybe we can look to the engagement that we've done in the past, and then how do we, the timing of the engagement, how many folks are participating, but also how many partnerships are coming out of this, how many relationships are being built from the staff end, from the city and counties and SACOG, that we can, reach out to CBOs as things come up. And that's also an indicator. And overall, a sentiment that also came out through the conversations and survey was that we also want to streamline participation and find ways that an engagement process from one thing can help another project or another idea, recognizing that when you go out just on a project by project basis, that can cause a lot of fatigue in the community, and then that results in less engagement. So jurisdiction is really interested in EEI helping to identify some sort of more streamlined engagement process. And then overall, just other ideas that came out of the one-on-ones and the survey and the roundtable that don't necessarily fit into these buckets. Some of the key themes that folks are interested on the jurisdiction side, the types of projects that they hope to get to are around transportation and mobility, open space and parks, beautification, public art, and housing. They were the highest ranked. And then we also asked about budget. we asked folks what have been some of the traditional budgets that you've worked with, and they range from 15,000 to 200,000. And so really wanting to recognize that engagement and project engagement is on a case-by-case basis, and every community is going to need a little bit of a different budget and a different resource allocation. So really wanting to understand what would make sense on the jurisdiction side. Staff compensation for engaging and working with CBOs is something that's really critical to understand as well. And understanding that we don't want to waste public funds on virtue projects or anything like that, but really want to produce measurable public health and good projects that come out of this process. So folks are very interested in seeing something like this go through, but also very cautious in that we do it the right way so that it actually leads to something. Of course, wanting to make sure that the benefits outweigh the community fatigue that could happen. I think everyone's just aware that there is a lot of community fatigue, and so making sure that EEI is something that adds value and just doesn't fatigue more community members. So that's a lot of information there from what Nicole and I both shared. I'm going to pause and see if there's anything I can elaborate on, or if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you both for that. Any questions from our committee? It's not. Lynette, you'll have to let me know if you're seeing any hands. I'm not seeing any hands up.
Okay, I'm looking how to get my hand up. Hold on.
There you go. I know it takes, just jump in. I don't need a hand. There's a few of us here.
I have my hand up. It's Jessie Lauren. I just want to say that this is so spot on. I do grant writing in my community, and I am, part of a small nonprofit, and this is just completely accurate to the experiences that I have in my small town. So thank you. Appreciate this presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Director Jennings.
Yeah, I'm the same way. That it is spot on, and I'm listening to everything that's being said as far as the application process, the lack of capacity at the different CBOs, what they can take on and what they can't take on. So this whole this intrigued me tremendously, and I'm very interested in getting more involved in. The question I wanted to ask was the 37 CBOs who are actively involved. If we can get an idea of, maybe not today, but if you could send the information to us, an idea of where those 37 CBOs are in relationship to our region. Okay, so that if there's an opportunity for CBOs to still get involved, I think some of us could take an active role in helping to determine the communities that need this type of support the most, and help them to get involved by collaborating with them to help them with the capacity issues and the staffing issues that they may have.
Yes, we can definitely provide the list of organizations, and it's definitely not, of course, we've closed the focus group portion of it, but the actual, partnership development and working with us on capacity building is still to come. So yes, we have space for more groups. We want to see more organizations. Like I mentioned, this was a while ago now, but we had shared a list that was about 100, a little over 100 across the 6 counties that we reached out to. Of course, not everyone even has capacity to join in those conversations. So that's why we're about 37. But yeah, we want to see more folks participate. I think a lot of the information that we gathered from the small sample is still going to be valid across the board, I think, for most folks. And so this was just for us to get sort of an insight into how we can create the framework, but we will be sharing out the draft and inviting others, even if they didn't participate in the focus groups or the one-on-ones, they still have the ability to weigh in on the final draft or the draft of the framework.
That's great. So let me just be intentional and ask this one question as far as North Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
Are CBOs from North Sacramento actively engaged and involved in the 37 that are involved in the process right now?
I need to look up the specific list, but I can for sure email you and confirm. I can give you the list of the names of the organizations.
So when we talk about high need communities, we're talking about many communities, but specifically right now in Sacramento, North Sacramento, And we just want to make sure, because they have a limited number of community-based organizations,
Mhm.
we want to make sure that if there's a way to get the ones that are working in that community engaged, involved, being a part of this whole process, I want to make sure that that happens. So
Sounds great.
No.
we're talking to you more and working with you more on this.
Of course. Nicole, did you want to add?
Yeah, just real quick, I know that we're going to send out the list of groups that have participated so far, along with who we've invited, but we have had a consistent representative from the Gardenland Northgate Neighborhood Association attend multiple of our focus groups.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Nicole.
Hey, Rosie, this is James. You could probably see me. I don't know. Do you have more? Because I wanted to make a point about community-based organizations across the region, but I don't want to interrupt if you have more to.
Oh, no, please go ahead. The next is just timeline. So this is a great time.
So I really appreciate the couple of comments we've had so far. I'd invite the board to make others. And I want to just try to make, as I try to do, some connections here. So one connection is to a lot of our work with our race equity inclusion working group and our racial equity action plan, right? And there's not the same, but there's overlapping pieces here. And the biggest overlapping piece is we've done a lot of reflection and thought and work since 2020 and the beginning of this race equity inclusion work. And one of our many conclusions is we do not have very good relationships with community-based organizations. We don't. We're not very good, I would say, generally in government. We're not very good at actually having meaningful relationships with organizations, knowing those communities, right? You know many of them. And so even if, and we're not just talking like nonprofits with transportation experience, we're talking nonprofits who know their communities, right? So for instance, food banks, faith-based organizations, right? I mean, you can run the list. And so even if these focus groups have closed, and I hope this is okay, Rosie, but the other thing I would say is, as we have asked you before, but hopefully this presentation might stimulate your thinking, any community-based organizations that you think are actually really important, they may have, again, may come from it may be, they're providing social services, right? They are, but if you could think about those organizations, pass them along, we're trying to kind of map, right, the networks that exist. We're trying to understand, especially those in, again, disinvested, disadvantaged communities, which the other connection I want to make is just to the lunch session today about sort of defining disadvantaged communities. Again, these are somewhat distinct, but lots of overlap. And those disadvantaged communities are everywhere in our region, everywhere, all 6 counties. And just think back to when we were up in Roseville, and we had the presentation about Invest Health and the core neighborhoods, and Director Gore got up, right, and I think used the term like, government generally sucks at doing engagement and outreach. And I'll just repeat that, it's a technical phrase, but I think it's true, right? And we're trying to actually understand that we're not gonna know everything. We don't know everything. We don't know community needs. But between yourselves, and we're partnering with all of your local cities and counties, but especially with a lot of the network of groups that exist, they might be all volunteer. We're trying to build those relationships as part of this program so that we can actually have communities begin to shape their future, their investments, especially with all the grant money coming down. So I want to just try to kind of give the big picture. I know you all have heard about this Engage, Empower, Implement program before and for a while. And that is partly because we are trying to be intentional, as I hope you're hearing today, and we're trying to listen, we're trying to engage, we're trying to do the things that honestly, I have just said, I think in the past, we haven't been very good at. So I just want to put that kind of larger framing on this and really invite all of you, hopefully we have your wheels turning about thinking about some of those community-based organizations and nonprofits, right? Not just, I mean, great if they're doing transportation, there's very few of them do that, but who know some of the needs in their communities and could tell us, you know what we really need? We need a van to the late shift job center because we can't get people to those jobs, right? That's the kind of knowledge that is so incredibly valuable.
Thank you, James. Any other questions? And if so, please, I know we're struggling with the hand thing, so just, oh, I see Director Sander.
Took me a few minutes, but I found the new location of raise your hand.
I know, that's why it's just as easy to
The
speak up.
update, you gotta like refigure it out. A couple of things come to mind, and I probably have more gray hair here than anybody else sitting at this table, at least with regard to SACOG. And I remember something, I think, James, you were our executive at the time, but we had an application from, I believe it was North Sacramento, Rick.
Yep.
And they were interested in, it was a ride share, maybe an Uber-like proposal that this neighborhood organization was making because their transit service was so bad. And it came in front of SACOG, and they were on the non-recommended list, and they appeared in front of us and argued about it. And that was, for me, sort of a watershed moment of thinking, here's this community group trying to do the right thing that is just overwhelmed by the requirements of an application. So they got tossed because, I don't know, they didn't have an economic impact statement signed off by some, economist on their application. They didn't have proper engineering drawings, or I don't know, didn't have a business plan worked out. Whatever it was, they got tossed. And there was a lot of angst on the board at the time, a lot of that expressed by me, about what are we doing here? If we cannot accommodate an interest from a group like that, it was a reasonable request on its face, maybe a little edgy, but reasonable, worthy of consideration, but we threw it out because of all the rules that dictate how we do business. And that's what, in the end, you want to be responsive to all those groups, but, we're in the transportation business, and I don't know if there is another agency, maybe HHS stuff, that is more, or education, that is more like regulated and technical and has all these hurdles to get over for every last thing we do. I mean, just think about the acronym barrier that we've got, right? About everything.
Yep.
Second little soundbite story. The National League of Cities has worked with Bloomberg Philanthropies to come up with a program to help small jurisdictions apply for federal transportation funding. So we've got record amount of transportation funding available from the feds, but small jurisdictions really can't apply for it because it's just too expensive. It's too technical. They don't have engineers sitting around ready to draft plans. They can't spend $20,000 per application. And the number of potential funding streams has grown from like 80 to 420 with the recent legislation. It's sort of gone nuts at the federal level. So NLC and Bloomberg have set up what I think is going to end up being about an $80 million partnership that literally helps these small jurisdictions, think like 15,000 and below, get applications across the line and in front of the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation is working hard to pay attention to those. But think of the amount of effort that's going into that still probably won't be enough. We're looking at the same issues here from that local example I gave you, or from the highly technical stuff that, is required by our governing rules and agencies, be they state or federal. This is a real challenge. And then on top of that, I have to agree, for 20 years as an elected official, I've heard about how important it is to engage your residents, and I concur. And I have yet to see that be done successfully without enormous effort. I mean, when we did our general plan in the city of Rancho Cordova the first time, it took a couple of years. We probably had 80 meetings or so. We fed, I don't know, 10,000 hot dogs probably at different meetings. It was a massive effort. That's as close to success as I've ever seen for engaging people. So this is an enormously high bar, and something this agency has never really been great at, nor really any other agency I've served on. So I think we've sort of got to temper our enthusiasm in some way, or maybe focus very narrowly on where we can find success. It's a very challenging situation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that it really does help put it in perspective. Director Soon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really appreciate Director Sanders' point. It is challenging. I think all of us experienced it in our local roles, and then you go to a regional level, and you just lose people. But I think a sustained effort, like is over time will be helpful. One thing that I think is encouraging is that every single one of us directors on here, we, by virtue of our work, engage with many of these CBOs, and they know us, we know them. We can help try to bridge that gap. So, you know, Rosie, Nicole, please, you know, don't hesitate to look for us as a resource for introductions. You know, food banks. I mean, we're all supportive of our respective food banks and other CBOs. So we can connect you with the executive directors. We can help explain the mission of SACOG. I loved, you know, seeing when, you know, SACOG, I saw Renee out one time at an event, and SACOG was there, and it was great introducing, you know, the organization to the community. So I think, Director Sandy, you're correct. It's a high bar, but I think it's worthwhile. And I think that we just, you know, that old saying about journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step type of thing. I think, you know, this is a nice segue into that realm. And I think there's a lot of help on the panel from our directors that can push this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. Anyone else have input or questions? All right. If not, thank you. What a great item and a great conversation to have. And I appreciate, James, as you summed it up, that it's kind of that phone goes both ways. This is an opportunity for us to be reaching out and develop some relationships and get feedback from the boots on the ground people. So thank you so much for that presentation. If there aren't any other further questions, then we're going to move on to our next item, and that is our Regional Mobility Hub. And Victoria Cacciatore is going to be our presenter.
Yes, good morning. I am Victoria Cacciatore. I'm the project manager for our Regional Mobility Hub strategy. And I think that one of my most impactful teachers was truthfully, my ag advisor. He was infrequently my teacher, but he was so impactful in how he led our Future Farmers of America leadership program at our high school. And just really, it was, I think, actually my first brush with this region, encountering all of the YOLO FFA chapters. But anyhow, I'm not here to talk about that. I am here, however, to preview the schedule for our Regional Mobility Hub strategy. We are about to kick off this project, and some of you may remember that last November, you authorized the release of a request for proposals and delegated authority to negotiate and finalize a contract with a consultant to conduct this study. We are about to wrap up the contract finalization, get that executed and kicked out the door, and we can use that to develop a tool for the implementers of mobility hubs, which are your agencies, the transit operators that provide services to your communities, and other regional partners such as air districts, utility providers who have an interest in how they might support vehicle electrification. So to couch this in terms of what are the other efforts that this ties to within SACOG, this is an implementation step from our next generation transit study, looking at how we can improve speed, the interregional connections, and the technology and the rider experience of people using transit. And also how we can look to the future of mobility that is going to emphasize moving people and not just vehicles. So with that, why mobility hubs? And broadly, you can look at it, it's another way to increase our access to what's important to us. Sorry, skipped a little. It's going to provide many options for like different modes in one place. And while I did mention that this is an implementation strategy for our next gen transit study, they are not always at transit hubs. They can be in places without transit connections at all, such as if you have a place where micromobility and a community car share come together. So please keep that in mind, that although they are frequently at transit, they do not have to be at transit stops. And while we're looking at how it increases our ability to access what's important to us, we as SACOG are also interested in their ability to reduce vehicle miles traveled. So here we have an example that is from one of a few existing plans in the region that looks at how we can implement mobility hubs. This is from the West Sacramento Mobility Action Plan. And West Sacramento was using their mobility action plan to identify actions they could take to advance the development of an equitable mobility system that strategically leveraged new technologies, new modes like those shared micro-mobility modes, so shared scooters, shared bikes, and all the while ensuring consistency with their climate change goals. So just with this example, you could see how this mobility hub is co-located with trip generators. You could use transit, get to and from the shopping center that's there. It also has a grocery store. So somebody could pick up food and catch the bus pretty easily to go back to their home. It has mobility choices. So you can connect to transit. You can see how there's biking and walking access to get there. And I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if you can, just close to people, there's that blue shaded area for your bike share parking, scooter share parking, and then other just basic bike parking for your trusty old Schwinn or Rally. It also has convenient and attractive access. We have the bike and scooter parking. It has nature-based solutions for stormwater management to help reduce flooding. And in general, those can help contribute to a cooler area. That's very important as we have some blazing hot summers here. And it also includes some space. It's called out as flexible space here. You can use that for all kinds of different activities, whether it's a pop-up market, a farmer's market. Maybe we could finally get one of those people painted all silver who moves very slowly. Finally get one, the aspirations, and then also the trees to provide that comfortable environment. So your mobility hub becomes an actual place where you're okay being, maybe you're even happy there, and you're not counting down the moments until you can leave, when your bus picks you up, when your ride share picks you up, etc. Okay, and I wanted to identify, while the sounds and the examples that we've talked about could tend to be a little bit more urban, this is not about identifying cookie cutter solutions for our region, because we are not a cookie cutter region. Only smaller parts of our region even identify as urban. So what we would have is acknowledging that for a regional network of mobility hubs to work, trips start and end in different places. Not all trips start and end in an urban environment. And so not all mobility hubs will be in urban environments. And they won't all need to have everything that we saw here, which has your park and ride. It has every mode you can imagine, and it has a grocery store that I'm personally a big fan of. But we will look at how mobility hubs can connect people to their important destinations and employment areas and commercial areas, how it connects to the residential sides of our region, and how it can use these different mobility options that are both existing and developing in our area. So micro-mobility, transit, car share, all of these coming together to provide convenient access to all of the different modes that are well suited to your environment, and not prescribing that every place needs a massive transit stop, not prescribing that every place needs car share, etc. And we are looking at how this will not be a standalone project, but how it's going to fit in with, say, SACOG's existing work that the board has helped shape, how it ties in with the intensification of land uses identified through Green Means Go, how it's going to increase connections to and from both existing and planned segments of the regional trail network, how it can work with the technological solutions provided by the Innovative Mobility Program, the enhanced connectivity of the regional transit network, and then also feed into what is planned as part of our RAISE grant. These design guidelines of identifying what a user could expect at different mobility hubs based on where they are in the region and where they're going, that those design guidelines can feed into our RAISE grant work, which will be kicking off shortly. And I defer to Christina Spence or James Corliss for more questions on that. And lastly, here is our aggressive and ambitious schedule that will or is planned to wrap up in a year again, so we can work the results of this into the RAISE grant schedule. And it is starting with our key collaborator outreach. So this is something of a preview of, we will be reaching out to your staff, to staff from transit operators, to various key partners throughout the region to make sure that the toolkit that is developed through this is useful to cities, counties, transit operators, communities, as they look to figure out what is the right level of mobility hub for their area. With that, we'll take any forward-looking input that you have on this project, specific areas of interest in your communities, or any other broad input that you have to share.
Thank you, Victoria. Any questions from our committee? You can raise your hand or you can speak up. I think it takes us longer to find the hand raise spot than it does just to speak up. Well, thank you. It looks like we are covered. Thank you so much for that presentation. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to the next update. And I think you are still with me. Let's see, our next item on improving public health and safety in Yuba counties and are there disinvested communities.
Yes, I'm very excited to remind everyone that for our August board meeting, we will be heading up to Yuba County, and Yuba County staff and Blue Zones project staff will be sharing about their efforts about how they are increasing biking and walking safety in their communities and other untold benefits that their collaborations have brought. So Yuba County staff has been working very diligently for at least the last decade to create solid biking and walking communities in the unincorporated county south of Marysville. And this has been an area of historic disinvestment. It started out as the area where workers who were not allowed to live in the city of Marysville were living. It was pushed, they were pushed out then by, I believe, residents that came from Oklahoma and Arkansas during the Dust Bowl. And so it's a community that has grown very organically. There is no master plan here. And since they started so far back, we don't necessarily have any of the basic like drainage infrastructure that you're normally going to think of when you want to get to and from places in your community. So while Yuba County has been working to create those safer networks, the Blue Zones project also identified them as the Yuba and Sutter County bi-county area as a place where they could launch their efforts to help improve community outcomes by looking at really three focus areas: tobacco cessation, increased access to healthy food, and what they would refer to as natural movement. So your ability to use your human-powered means, whether that's biking, that's walking, skateboarding, rollerblading. Any Barbie fan? No. Okay. Any of those methods that suit you to be able to travel outside of your vehicle, to have the physical activity access that is going to, give you those positive health outcomes of like decreased risk of the diseases of inactivity, such as heart disease, and then also improved mental health. So They will be sharing about those activities, and there's also a special invite to members of the board to attend a pre-meeting walking tour that will showcase infill development and regional walking biking infrastructure that is planned within both Marysville and Yuba County. James will have more info about that closer to the date. And if I may, I do see that Director Branscombe has his hand raised.
Thank you. And maybe I misheard, but early on you mentioned something about the communities, you were discussing the communities south of Marysville, and you said something about communities had been pushed out of Marysville. I know a lot about Marysville and I don't know anything about that, so you're gonna have to tell me about it.
Okay, this is what I heard from Yuba County staff about how some of early on in.
Hey, Victoria, can I, I'll tell you what, we've got this invitation, which we're super excited about, Mayor Branscombe, right, to come up to Marysville and Yuba County. Let's make part of that history, part of the walking tour at 8:30 a.m.
Well, but that's fine, but the thing is, that's a rather pejorative comment, and I'd like to know more about what's behind it. If you're going to say something like that, you need some hard evidence. You need more than I know.
I think it's being relayed from some staff that she talked to. So I get where you're coming from. Rather than go into it in detail now, I think part of why we're going up to Yuba County and Marysville, right, is to learn about your jurisdictions, your challenges, the great things you're doing. So let's make that part of the tour on the 17th, which is at 8:30 a.m., starting at the Brick Coffee House. Again, that's an early start for many of you that are not up in Yuba Sutter, but I'm really hoping that you can all join us at 8:30 a.m. That's an invite to the board members of SACOG.
Thank you, and I think I saw the floor here. The point is, if someone told you that, then get a hold. Please share that information with me. If someone told you something like that, it's news to me, and I'd like to know who it was so that I can follow up. Okay. Thank you.
Got it. We got it, Director Branscombe. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Branscombe. That will be part of the carrot as we get people to come and learn and share all of those some opinions and informations. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to it, and I'm hoping that means we all leave with a basket of peaches. That is on my list of requirements if I'm going to Yuba City. Get to hit the peach fields. We are going to move on to our next item then, and it is our 2025 Blueprint Pathways. And Caden, presenter.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee members. This is an information item. It's a continuation of our discussion on the 2025 Blueprint Pathways and their performance. As you know, the pathways are a learning tool to better understand how the decisions that we're making in the blueprints on land use and transportation impact our ability to achieve our goals in the triple bottom line framework that the board adopted last year. So we've had an opportunity to explore the pathways through a variety of lenses over the course of this year. We've had presentations on land use, housing, access, road maintenance, vehicle miles traveled, congestion. As part of today's presentation, we're going to be diving into a topic that we haven't spent a lot of time on, but one that's critically important, and that's public health. Specifically, how do the built environment characteristics that SACOG is helping to shape influence how healthy our region's residents are going to be? I'm pleased to say that we have the perfect guest speaker to unpack this relationship and explore some early results of their analysis on the public health implications of the Blueprint Pathways. We have Larry Frank, who's the president of Urban Design for Health, or UD4H. UD4H works with national, state, regional, and local government agencies to address the health impacts of transportation investments, land use development, urban design. Dr. Frank is a professor at UC San Diego and University of British Columbia, where he's published over 100 peer-reviewed articles on the interaction between land use, travel behavior, and health. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Larry.
Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everyone. I am on West Coast time. Thank you for this opportunity. I've been studying the relationships between transportation investment and land use decisions for over a third of a century now, and it's nice to be able to apply the results of our research to decision making like yours. I'm actually looking for a way. Okay, there's the share. So I'm going to show presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. All right. So this follows nicely on the discussion about an application of these concepts in Yuba County. I am familiar with your geography. I've done a good bit of work across the state of California and of course across the country. So our project is to explore the methodology and evidence and incorporate health metrics into your regional transportation planning process to help support you in your efforts to do that. I've done this exact type of work in other regions of the country. And so we're building on a lot of evidence as mentioned. Starting with the pathways themselves, the research pathways analytically, the things that you shape through your transportation planning processes and other land use decisions that you make through Lunar and other mechanisms. Transportation infrastructure, clearly a major core part of your work, and the land use decisions that you make. Pedestrian infrastructure, seating, lighting, benches, eyes on the street, ability to cross streets easily. That's pedestrian environment. These features, these details and design features really matter a lot. Green space affects travel and activity patterns. And then those travel and activity patterns result in different levels of physical activity. So a lot of the research that we've done, numerous NIH grants, about $30 million worth of research so far that we've done on this topic, really focus on sedentary behavior and physical activity in relation to travel, as was explained previously. But there's also many other features that affect our health related to where we live and where we go. Other behavioral mechanisms include social interaction, the mental health piece, belonging, feeling part of a community, diet. And then there's exposures at the same time. How much air pollution are we breathing while we're being active? Our exposure to traffic safety and crime, noise, all of these features as well. So exposures and behaviors interact through time and space to affect our biological responses, such as weight, inflammation, and stress, which each interact with each other to affect chronic disease outcomes that are both physical and mental in nature. That then affects healthcare utilization and cost and workforce productivity. And a lot of the work that we're going to talk about actually has significant economic impacts and social justice and equity impacts, because chronic disease is concentrated in the most vulnerable populations, which is a spatial phenomenon. So that's important. So as was discussed previously and extensively during this meeting, I've been listening, the infrastructure that's available, the funding at the federal level, lots of funding available, focusing on climate, resilience, equity, and safety. So you're doing a great job, teeing up and making yourselves competitive for this type of money with the good work that you're doing. It's challenging, obviously, for different jurisdictions that aren't, as much capacity, but efforts are there to try to help that. But this is important work because the criteria for federal funding speaks directly to equity, health, and social justice. And these types of improvements and additions to the planning process really can help make your investment, your proposals more competitive. So there are many different elements of the built environment that affect our health. I just showed these in another diagram, the pathways, which is a peer-reviewed paper. The macro transportation infrastructure, that's transit, roadway, getting around the region, and how long it takes from any given location to get to opportunities, and how that varies across demographic subgroups. And the complete communities, that's the mixed use, the density, what we call walkability, that I've been using the term since the late 80s, and then the pedestrian environment. So I think an important point heading into this discussion is the distinction that we understand that travel is for recreation and utility. It's both. And active travel can be both recreation and destination based. Both forms do result in physical activity that can reduce downstream chronic disease, such as diabetes and heart disease and all the things I just showed and talked about. However, sedentary time, including time spent in cars, also causes obesity and downstream chronic disease. 20 years ago, I published the seminal paper in Atlanta that's shown below in reference, where we basically documented time spent in cars as a very significant predictor of obesity. So what that means is that you can design communities that encourage recreational travel that may actually also require a lot of utilitarian vehicle-based travel, that the recreational travel can be active. But the results, the way the evidence has shaken out over 20 years, makes it very clear that the sedentary time in cars actually adds up to a lot of adverse health impacts. So you can actually have a lot of walking or more walking occurring and biking when people get home to their, to where they live and out in maybe less central areas. But the time that they're spending in the car not only results in more air pollution and carbon, it actually results in sedentary time and increased likelihood of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. It's just the way it is. So a win-win relationship between health and co-benefits and climate mitigation, in reality, according to the evidence, can be best achieved through the inclusion of active travel within daily destination-based travel, building it right into how you get around. So we have, to address these things, built the National Public Health Assessment Model. This model actually grew out of California. It was peer-reviewed by the Strategic Growth Council, the Office of Policy Research, and OPR and others, and has been used widely. It's funded by the US EPA with input from our client, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. NFAM's been applied in 13 regions of North America, pretty good representation, a good bit in California. The inputs for NFAM are demographic, who we are, our age, our race, income, vehicle ownership characteristics, family structure, employment. Demographics are really critical in predicting health outcomes, and that's a very key part to make the model rigorous. All of this work is peer-reviewed and published in top scientific journals. The built environment metrics I already mentioned, went through that a good bit. Those are inputs that we then have our statistical modeling process that then allows us to predict body mass index, physical activity, overweight, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, coronary heart disease, and then annualized cost of illness, and actually many other outcomes that we're now working on, such as depression and dementia and cancer. Some of that is coming online soon. So you're very familiar with these pathways. Pathway 1 is outward expansion and limited infill. Pathway 2, balanced infill and phased expansion. And then pathway 3 is more of a focus on what would happen if more focus was on infill with limited expansion. And I know this is your work and not much need for me to say too much about it. We're just looking at the relative differences across these pathways from a health perspective. This is the distribution spatially in the region of the different types of community development types. You're very familiar with this, I'm sure, with the existing centers and corridors, established community, developing communities, and potentially developing areas. So the different pathways are different distributions of the 200 of the new population and where they will go. So we have modeled the effect of that on health. For example, coronary heart disease. So this is pathway 1, and the blue, so I have to go through this. We worked hard, and I give a lot of credit to SACOG staff, to Dove and others there together to figure out how best to communicate this, and we welcome your feedback, of course. The blue bar charts are the distribution of the population, the new households, 278,000 new households, I believe, are distributed, and you can see the proportion that go into the different types of development centers and corridors, existing communities, developing communities, and rural residential. So for pathway 1, you can see in blue where most of the growth is going into developing communities. The red line is the prevalence rate for coronary heart disease that comes out of our statistical models that we have developed using the California Health Interview Survey data of around 50,000 people in the state of California. And I can talk about the methodological approach to doing that, as mentioned earlier. So this shows the distribution and basically has a percentage prevalence rate. As you move from centers and corridors to existing to developing communities and rural residential, the prevalence rate increases. That is a function of more time in cars and less active travel for those areas. And according to the way the models that we have the statistical results, that's what we observe. And it's consistent with evidence from elsewhere around the world. So compared to pathway 1, pathway 2, which is a more balanced growth perspective, has about a 5.8% fewer cases of coronary heart disease compared to pathway 1, which is also a future projection, not baseline. So the blue bars is the distribution of new households, the red line is prevalence rate. And here we are in pathway 2. You can see the distribution's a little different. What's changed here is the distribution of households across these development types. You get a health benefit from that. Pathway 3 gives you even a greater health benefit in terms of reduction relative to pathway 1 of coronary heart disease, 11.4% fewer cases. On to hypertension. So with hypertension, same exact methodological approach. You see pathway 1 has a greater percentage of growth going to the developing communities again. And what we observed comparatively to pathway 1 with respect to hypertension, pathway 2 has 2.1% fewer new cases. And the distribution is as you see it with the blue bar charts. And pathway 3, again, is more focused in the centers and corridors, and you see a 3.1% fewer cases. So one thing to mention is the percentage may seem small, but the population level impact is huge. And chronic disease is expensive. Obviously, by definition, as you annualize and look at over the lifespan, it is becoming clearer to me, and we've done a lot of work on this topic in many ways across the country, that the health impacts when monetized are as big as the infrastructure costs themselves. So this is a major area of expansion for transportation as a science because its inherent effect on public health. So here's a little bit about the money part. We did a little bit of a analysis, just preliminary. There's a lot more to be done, but pathway 2 and pathway 3 compared to pathway 1, I showed these differences for coronary heart disease. We also have some information on diabetes that we've modeled that will be available soon. Hypertension I presented, and then cost of illness shows a net percentage reduction of 4.2% for pathway 2 compared to 1, and 7.7% for pathway 3 compared to 1, or pathway 2 saves 1.3 billion over 30 years, and pathway 2, and pathway 3 about 2.5 over 30 years. That's just looking at the 278,000 new residents. There's also the much larger proportion of residents who are already living in the region, and how the environment as it changes and the investments that you make impact them. The numbers are way bigger. And we're just looking at cost of illness. We're not looking at workforce productivity. For example, we were hired by the Southern California Association of Governments in 2017 to model and predict the impacts of the health benefits of the active transportation infrastructure investments they had set aside through their bond funding, about $12.8 billion. We learned, I hired AECOM as our subcontractor who runs a REMI model, which is a cost benefit tool used in transportation widely. And we've gotten, the initial result was an $8.41 payback for every dollar spent on active transportation. The little piece or the proportion that you're looking at so far sits within this $5.96 payback, which is combined with workforce productivity. I know the distribution and it's about half. So about half, or $3 for every dollar spent on active transportation, comes back with health benefits. But there's that workforce productivity piece. And then there's many other ways in which, and this is just looking at adults, not elderly. So we're just scratching the surface with these numbers at this point, but we do understand the trajectory and the magnitude is considerable. Finally, I just thought I would put in a slide to show that the results, this is from Vancouver, Canada, and I realize Canada is a little bit different, but very significant differences. As you move from the most car dependent to the most walkable environments, we see significant benefits from a health perspective in certain ways. But I will say that while not shown here, somewhat car dependent and somewhat walkable, which is still leafy green, moderate density, not urban corridors, not urban at all, but kind of moderate, maybe the mobility hubs that you're developing in the less urbanized areas is a way to think about it. Those somewhat walkable places bring inherently significant health benefits through shorter driving distances and less car dependence overall. So in summary, significant reductions in chronic disease and related costs were observed for pathway 2 and 3. Results do not capture the indirect effects of workforce productivity or economic impacts of transportation investment on land value. The cost of illness estimates do not capture differences across gender, age of onset of illness. Anyways, there's some other features that this is only, I think I really covered this slide, so I think I can move on. And just thank you for your time and look forward to any questions that I hope you have. Maybe a lot to digest.
Well, then we get off of mute here and check. Thank you so much. That was a very detailed and in-depth presentation. I appreciate that very much. I am looking to see, do we have any questions or comments? I see Director Soon.
Thanks, Chair Gallardo, but I want to bring your attention. I think one of the attendees has their hand up, had their hand up first. I don't know what you wanted to do, Coda West.
I'm gonna let you go because you're the only hand I see right now, and then I'll ask Lynette to help me find who's the other person.
Okay, great. Sounds good. First of all, Larry, thank you so much for that presentation. It was very informative. I'm not surprised at all by the results, but I did have a question regarding some of the data. When was that data collected?
The California Health Interview Survey data, we actually used 3 years of it to power up. And I believe this model, we're using our new model, so I'll have to verify, but I would imagine probably 2019, 2020, and 2021, perhaps. Okay. Right about, it's fairly recent, and it's yeah, okay.
So during COVID.
I'll need to verify the dates before we can make a determination. I'll get back exactly the dates. We use different bracketed windows. These results are not, I believe, maybe just pre, it could be 2018, 19, and 20. I have to look. I don't know the exact. We've been building many different iterations of these models. It's fairly recent, but the impact of COVID is not, we've written extensively and published on the effect of COVID. And I do not have I have no reason to believe that these results are skewed, or the travel behavior. If we were studying that effect directly, and I was showing you trip generation on transit and other things, then I would say yes. But I don't think you're looking at results that are really dramatically or any major way affected by COVID.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just, so I'll just say for my colleagues, I mean, as we go through this process, I mean, I'm going to continue to harp on the complexity and the uncertainty of how we go about looking at these, these scenarios that we're planning. Everything that Mr. Frank presented, I fully agree with. I mean, if you're able to not have to sit in your car for a long time, you can use that extra hour that you gain to exercise and walk. And if you're in a community that is walkable, I mean, I think it's pretty intuitive that you'd be able to get out more and not be sedentary. But I will say, like, as we and believe me, I'm not advocating for, you know, the I think it's the third scenario or the worst sprawl scenario. But you know, there's an article in the Bee that just talked about California state employees in 22 departments are spending more than 90% of their days working remotely, according to the Department of General Services. So that's just 3 days ago. And I know that my old colleagues at the state are, and they're in that database as well. Most of them are 75% of them are teleworking. And if I was still there, I'd be teleworking. So my point is, we cannot assume that because we build out, you know, in a certain way that people are necessarily on the roads. And I think to me, it's also fascinating because the remote work environment has really disrupted things. And so again, I'm not advocating that we, you know, try to sprawl, but I also submit to my colleagues that it isn't a guarantee that just because we build somewhere that they're going to be on the road and sitting sedentary for hours at a time. That it's not a guarantee anymore because of this technology. And I'll quickly add that it's not just the Sacramento Bee article. There's a Fortune magazine article that talks about employees are saying that they want to flex time, that they will 78% will leave the company if they're not afforded this flexibility in their work schedules. And it's a lot, I think it's 48% are seeking that type of flexibility in their work schedules. So I think this, you know, we are, I think on the forefront, you know, this organization has always been on the forefront of data gathering. And as we plan, we have to plan for the new behaviors and the technology disruptions that we're experiencing today. And so I just want to highlight that to my colleagues as we move forward in this process. So thank you very much.
Can I ask a question? Dov, let me know if I have a response, but I want to defer to you first.
Go ahead, Dr. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, what the evidence is showing now is that those people that are working from home, I mean, we're seeing more people work from home, no doubt about it. That's having, you know, obviously that would reduce your time spent in cars for commuting. But what we're seeing is the people that are located depending if they work from a home that's located in a walkable community, they're walking more. And they can go to the grocery store, they can go to restaurants, and they're doing it. But if they can't, they don't. So that would be great. But, you know, in fact, where people are choosing to relocate because of this decoupling of home and work is often in the least possibly walkable areas in terms of anything for destination. And the truth is that the recreational walking that you're hoping that people will get is fairly unstructured, and only the most self-motivated people actually really do it on a regular basis. So the evidence is actually not really confirming that this decoupling is really going to help us so much on the health side. It's actually probably, if anything, the opposite, unfortunately. And it is allowing outward growth to be much more rampant. And so that's a concern. That's just what the evidence shows. But I think there's plenty of room for debate and discussion. And I appreciate your comments, very thoughtful.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Frank. So if I'm hearing you correctly, certain individuals, they might walk to the grocery store, but they won't walk on their own for their own benefit. So it's more, is that what I'm hearing you say, the evidence, your current evidence is showing?
Yeah, I mean, if depending on where you're working at home from, that physical form of that community really matters. And so because you're spending more time there, you're more exposed to that environment. So it doesn't solve, because the commute, you may have reduced time spent commuting, but people working from home their behaviors tied very much then even more so to the physical design of the home, where the environment where their home's located.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you very much. I mean, that is not my personal experience. I actually do more because of that, but like you said, the only most self-motivated, and it's not what I've experienced from colleagues in the suburban areas. But again, it's not scientific. What I'm hearing, you present that evidence. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And if I may, Director Suen, just to tack on, just to kind of corroborate what Dr. Frank is saying about the built environments really mattering. I think we focus a lot, at SACOG and in sort of, transportation land use modeling on the commute trip, but there's just a huge chunk of trips that have nothing to do with your work. And I don't want to misspeak, as we have updated replica, like big data numbers all the time on this, but last we looked, it was somewhere in the 80-85% of trips that are happening that are non-commute trips. And so it really does matter, sort of the built environment for all of those trips as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Director Suen. I had a similar thought. I think so much of it for us is because of the pandemic, it's really skewed some of the things, and we haven't had time to figure out if those patterns are permanent or where they're going to be. I can tell you that in our newest neighborhood, about 30% of the new residents of Rockland are coming from the Bay Area, and they are continuing to work at businesses in the Bay Area. So not commuting, working from home. So I think that's right. All of us what's the long-term projections for that? And do we have enough data to be able to make those projections? Thank you. Any other input or questions?
Chair Gallardo, it looks like Director Lauren has her hand raised.
Thank you. Go ahead.
More of a comment than a question. I just want to say that, I live in Winters and we're kind of pretty far out there in SACOG territory and very rural. But in the built environment, we have Highway 128 that goes through our entire town. So where you live and how walkable your area is depends on kind of what side of 128 you're on, because you're going to have to cross a highway. And then if you're south and you're on the other side of the 505, you're really limited because there's no pedestrian safety to cross the 505 and get to school or anything else. You have to be in a vehicle. A lot of people that work in the Sacramento area and in the Bay Area have moved to Winters and they are commuting, but the only way they could there's only one grocery store in town, and a lot of people don't shop in town. So the only way that you can go to a store is to get in the car and drive, at least 15 miles or just order it all from Amazon or what have you. So we have a lot of people working from home, but everything else is car dependent. And if you're on the wrong side of that highway, all the events downtown, you have to drive to or risk your safety. So the built environment really hampers walkability, bikeability, and so forth in a small rural area like Winters. So I appreciate the presentation, and it really gives me food for thought in future planning. And we're talking about putting in a lot of houses on the north side of town that would be on the other side of 128 from the downtown. So there will be definite impacts. So this is really fruitful, and I appreciate the presentation.
Chair Gallardo, can I do one final connection just back to our upcoming board workshop? What we were just saying earlier for the board members, Marysville downtown, 8:30 a.m. August 17th. The workshop in Yuba County is going to be on, as Victoria was saying, sort of infrastructure in a community, unincorporated Yuba that really doesn't even have sidewalks. But also we're going to hear from the Blue Zones project, and Blue Zones, if you don't know them, is fascinating. They're up in Yuba and Sutter. And one of the things that they went and basically studied all the communities across the globe where you have a sort of 100-year life expectancy, right? And one of the key pieces of that was you have physical activity built into your community. It is just absolutely natural part of your day, that you're walking. It's walkable. You have a built environment. Often there's hills involved too, so you're literally doing hills. But it is I just want to make that connection a little bit with all this great health research, right? And the health outcomes of building good communities and infrastructure. That we're going to hear a little bit of that too, I think, through the Blue Zones piece, because as we all know, we just have a ton of barriers and a lack of safe infrastructure right now, in addition to our land use pattern, that I think really does prevent a lot of that physical activity happening on the natural. So that's, again, another teaser for August 17th. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you for the reminder about that. I think that's the part that we're really enjoying about getting out to the different areas is we're going to get a lot smarter and have those opportunities to see what everybody's about. Any other matters for our committee as we wind up?
Chair Gallardo, we do have a hand raised for public comment. Would you like to take that now?
Yes, please.
Great. Dr. Larry Ozeron, if I'm saying that right, you're in the meeting and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin by thanking you all for your work. This is the first SACOG meeting I've attended since before COVID, and I want to say how much I appreciate the thoughtful, purpose-driven conversations I've heard today. I was drawn to this call to hear about how public health is being considered in the transportation plans. I'm very glad to hear that you're talking about it and taking it into account in the process. I won't restate the presentation you heard from Professor Frank. Instead, I want to build on it and suggest that there might be an opportunity to take the next step to explore how healthcare savings could be a lever for some mobility options that might seem too costly to implement without that additional funding. So this is something I shared the potential for potentially innovative pilots with Chris Doherty several months ago. And I'd be happy to revisit this issue with Chris if this is something that's of interest to the board to consider in future conversations. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your input. Appreciate that. Any other public comment on that item?
There's no other public comment.
Thank you so much. As I think we've covered our other matters as well. We know we're doing a lunch presentation, so those that can stay, we will be doing lunch presentation. Our next meeting for this committee will be on Thursday, September the 7th at 10 o'clock. And thank you, Vice Chair, for covering that for me. And I will look forward. I will try and check in, but I will be busy cheering on like everyone should. Go Irish at the games. Thank you. Thank you all so much. And we are adjourned.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.